My name is Frank Morrison, and for 19 years I kept the steel flowing at Midwest Steel Solutions. Ever felt like you'd become invisible in your own workplace? That's exactly what happened to me. 19 years of midnight calls when Furnace 3 threw a thermal alarm. 19 years of training young engineers who couldn't tell a thermocouple from a thermometer. 19 years of building systems that worked, systems that lasted, systems that kept 2,400 workers safe and employed. But apparently that made me legacy infrastructure. The trouble started when Consolidated Industrial Partners bought us out last spring. Within a month, they brought in Trevor Ashford as Chief Innovation Officer. Stanford MBA, McKinsey background. The kind of guy who'd never gotten his hands dirty, but could tell you exactly how to optimize operational efficiency while sipping a $7 latte. Trevor had this habit of starting conversations with listen, like he was about to share the secret of the universe. He'd walk through our Cleveland facility pointing at control panels I'd designed, shaking his head at systems that had run flawlessly for 2 decades. His assistant, some kid named Braden Walsh, followed behind taking notes on an iPad, nodding whenever Trevor made pronouncements about digital transformation. "Listen, Frank," he said during our first meeting, "I've been reviewing your infrastructure setup. Impressive for its time, but we're looking at a complete evolution here." I sat across from him, watching him gesture at printouts of my SCADA diagrams like they were cave paintings. "Those systems control 4 blast furnaces," I said. "They've run at 97. 3% uptime for the past 5 years. "Right. And that's fantastic legacy performance," Trevor replied. But his voice had that edge people get when they're trying to sound patient. "But the board's breathing down my neck. We need serious ROI within 18 months, or there might not be a plant to argue about." For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Actual worry. Maybe Trevor wasn't just a corporate climber. Maybe he was under real pressure too. "What exactly are you proposing?" "AI-driven predictive maintenance, cloud-based analytics, real-time optimization. My guys from Austin think we can increase efficiency by 30% while cutting operational costs." He leaned forward. "Frank, I'm trying to save this place." I'd heard variations of this speech before, but something in Trevor's tone made me wonder if he actually believed it. It started slow. First, I noticed I couldn't access the investor dashboard anymore. Just a red permission denied screen where my reports used to be. My calendar invites to product meetings vanished. When I asked Braden about the Tuesday integration call, he said, "Oh, Trevor wants to streamline the communication flow. You've got a lot on your plate already." I had plenty on my plate, all right. Like not throwing my company laptop through a window. The real warning came when Trevor brought in his Austin team, Skylar Brooks and 2 other consultants who looked like they'd stepped out of a startup brochure. Skylar was maybe 35, spoke entirely in tech jargon, and had never seen the inside of a steel mill before Tuesday. "Frank," Trevor said, cornering me near the break room, "I need you to walk Skylar through your control architecture. Full technical download. We're aiming for complete migration by the 4th quarter." I looked at Skylar, who was explaining something to Braden while pointing at a diagram that was clearly upside down. "What's his background?" "Automotive mostly. Some aerospace." Trevor's smile was getting tighter. "Frank, I know this feels fast, but we're running out of runway." That's when I remembered something I'd pushed to the back of my mind for 20 years. Back in 2004, when Morrison Steel got folded into Midwest Steel Solutions, there'd been an accident at a plant in Pittsburgh. 3 guys got burned because someone bypassed a safety interlock to meet a production deadline. During our acquisition negotiations, I'd insisted on language that would prevent management shortcuts on safety. Section 15D. All safety-critical blast furnace control systems require original system architect approval for modification or replacement. I'd forgotten about that clause, buried in hundreds of pages of merger documents. But sitting there watching Skylar point at upside-down diagrams, I started to wonder if it was still valid. 20 years is a long time. Companies merge, contracts get amended, clauses get superseded. That night I went home to Linda, my wife of 27 years. She was in the kitchen, still wearing her scrubs from her shift at Cleveland General's ICU when I walked in looking like someone had kicked my dog. "Rough day?" she asked, not looking up from the medical journals she was reviewing. "New management's got ideas," I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Frank Morrison," she said, setting down her journal and giving me that look she'd perfected over nearly 3 decades of marriage. "What aren't you telling me?" I sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten dinner every night for 15 years, where Katie had done her mechanical engineering homework before heading off to Ohio State, where Jake still spread out his football playbooks every Tuesday under Coach Bill Hendricks' guidance. "They're talking about transitioning legacy personnel," I said. Trevor asked me to put together a knowledge transfer document for the new systems team. Linda set down her pen. Knowledge transfer for who? Some outfit from Austin. Schuyler Brooks and Associates. Digital consultants. And where does that leave you? I took a long pull from my beer. Enhanced transition package, he called it. Early retirement with full benefits if I cooperate with the handover. The silence stretched between us. Katie had 2 more years at Ohio State at $47,000 a year. Jake was looking at colleges, talking about maybe following his sister into engineering. Our mortgage had 8 years left on it. Linda's ICU nurse salary was solid, but it wasn't going to cover everything if I wasn't working. Maybe some modernization wouldn't be terrible, Linda said carefully. You're always saying the younger engineers don't understand the old systems. That's exactly the problem, I said. They want to replace systems that work with consultants who don't understand steel production. Linda, these people think blast furnaces are just another software problem. She was quiet for a moment, the way she got when she was thinking through a patient's complex medical situation. What happens if you say no? I don't know yet, but I need to understand my options. The next morning, I decided to do some homework. I called Carmen Rodriguez, our company legal counsel. Carmen had been with the firm since 2008. She'd helped me navigate a patent dispute years ago when a competitor tried to claim they'd invented my thermal management algorithms. Frank, good to hear from you, she said. What can I do for you? I need to review some documentation from the 2004 acquisition, I said, specifically around system architect responsibilities. There was a pause. Frank, this is dangerous territory. Are you sure about this? Just want to make sure I understand my obligations around safety-critical systems. Carmen's voice was tight. These aren't the kind of questions that stay quiet, Frank. If management finds out I'm researching this, I understand. She agreed to pull the files, but I could hear the worry in her voice. While I waited, I started documenting everything, not because I was planning anything, but because 19 years of experience had taught me to keep good records. I pulled up the Git logs from our version control system, 19 years of commits, thousands of them, each one stamped with my user ID. I printed out the patent applications for my thermal management algorithms, filed under the company name but listing me as the primary inventor. I reviewed the maintenance logs for every major repair I'd supervised, every system upgrade I'd implemented, every safety modification I'd made after learning from close calls. The files Carmen sent confirmed what I'd half remembered. Section 15D was still there, unchanged since 2004. But contracts are one thing, enforcement is another. Big companies have expensive lawyers who specialize in finding ways around inconvenient clauses. Meanwhile, Trevor was making his rounds, holding alignment sessions with the engineering staff. He'd stand in front of the whiteboard talking about paradigm shifts and disruptive innovation, while guys like Roy Kellerman, our union shop steward, sat in the back rolling their eyes. 22 years I've been here, Roy said to me after one of Trevor's presentations. Never seen a blast furnace controlled by artificial intelligence. You? Not yet, I said. This new kid's gonna get someone killed, Pete Kowalski muttered. Pete ran maintenance and had been my friend since we both started here in our 30s. You can't run a steel plant from a laptop in Austin. But Trevor was already moving fast. He brought in Schuyler Brooks and 2 other consultants from Texas, set them up in the conference room with laptops and energy drinks, and started talking about rapid deployment timelines. Frank, Trevor said, cornering me near the break room again, I need you to walk Schuyler through your control architecture. Full technical deep dive. I started working with Schuyler, trying to explain the basics of thermal management and pressure control. Schuyler was enthusiastic, I'll give him that. But enthusiasm doesn't replace experience when you're dealing with molten steel at 3,000 degrees. So if the oxygen content drops below optimal, Schuyler said during one of our sessions, the AI system just adjusts the input flow rates automatically. That's one option, I said. But you also have to consider the grade of ore, the moisture content, the ambient temperature, the age of the refractory lining. Right, but machine learning handles all those variables simultaneously. I looked at him across the conference table, this 35-year-old consultant who'd never seen what happens when a blast furnace thermal management system fails. Schuyler, have you ever been inside an active steel mill? Well, no, but I've studied the operational parameters extensively. When I started here, an old-timer named Bill Hendricks told me something, I said. He said the furnaces talk to you, but you have to know how to listen. Temperature fluctuations, pressure variations, the sound of the cooling fans, they tell you what's happening before any computer knows there's a problem. Schuyler nodded politely, but I could see he thought I was just another old guy stuck in the past, telling stories about the good old days when men were men and steel was steel. 2 weeks later, we got our first real test. Skylar's AI system was monitoring Furnace 2 when it detected what it classified as a thermal anomaly and recommended increasing oxygen flow to optimize the burn. In reality, the anomaly was normal temperature variation that occurs when you're transitioning between different grades of steel. Increasing oxygen flow at that moment would have created a dangerous overpressure condition. I was monitoring from the control room when it happened. Skylar was at his laptop, confident in his algorithms, ready to implement the AI's recommendation. Roy Kellerman was standing behind him, face creased with worry. "Frank," Roy said quietly, "that doesn't look right to me." I had about 30 seconds to decide whether to let Skylar learn from experience or prevent a potential disaster that could hurt people Roy had worked with for 22 years. I chose prevention. I overrode the system manually, maintaining the temperature profile that would safely complete the grade transition. "What the hell, Frank?" Skylar snapped. The system had it under control. "The system would have created an overpressure condition," I said. "Check your pressure calculations." Skylar ran the numbers and went quiet. 5 minutes later, he came over to my station, his startup confidence noticeably deflated. "How did you know?" he asked. 20 years of listening to furnaces," I said. Later that week, Trevor called me into his office. Wade Pemberton, his VP of operations, was there too, along with Braden taking notes on his ever-present tablet. "Frank," Trevor said, his usual warmth replaced by something tighter, "we need to talk about the Furnace 2 incident." "What about it? Skylar says you overrode the AI recommendations without following proper protocols." I looked at Wade, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. "The proper protocol is to prevent accidents," I said, which is what I did. Trevor's face was getting red now. "Frank, I've been more than patient with this transition, but I need to know you're on board with the program. The program that nearly created an overpressure event on Furnace 2? The program that's going to save this company," Trevor shot back. That weekend, I drove up to my brother Danny's bar in Akron. Danny had been running the Iron Horse for 15 years, catering to steel workers and cops and guys who fix things for a living. It was the kind of place where the beer was cold, the conversation was honest, and nobody talked about paradigm shifts. "You look like hell," Danny said, sliding a whiskey across the bar. "Feel like it too." I told him about Trevor, about the Austin consultants, about the close call with Furnace 2. Danny listened without interrupting, the way bartenders learn to do. When I finished, he refilled my glass and leaned against the bar. "Remember when we were kids? Dad used to take us to the plant on Saturdays?" I nodded. Our father had worked blast furnaces for 38 years, came home every night with soot under his fingernails and stories about the steel that built America. "He used to say the furnaces were like living things," Danny continued. "You had to know them, understand them, respect them. Can't learn that from a book." "Can't learn it from a computer either," I said. "So what are you gonna do?" I stared into my whiskey, thinking about Katie and her mechanical engineering classes, about Jake looking at colleges, about Linda working double shifts in the ICU to help people through their worst moments. "What I have to do," I said, "take care of my family." But driving home that night, I started thinking about that Section 15D clause, about Roy's worried face when he saw those pressure readings, about 2,400 workers whose lives depended on thermal controls and pressure releases and emergency shutdowns that I'd designed to fail safe, not fast. Monday morning, I made a decision. I called Carmen Rodriguez back. "Carmen," I said, "I need you to pull those 2004 acquisition documents again, specifically Section 15D. "Frank, what's going on?" "I need to know exactly what my legal obligations are regarding safety-critical system modifications." There was a pause. "Are they pressuring you to approve something you're not comfortable with?" "Let's just say I want to make sure I understand all my options." Carmen agreed to do a comprehensive review. While I waited, I kept documenting everything. Every system I'd built, every modification I'd made, every safety protocol I'd implemented. 19 years of keeping furnaces running and workers safe. 2 weeks later, Trevor called an all-hands meeting to announce the digital transformation timeline. The entire engineering staff crammed into the conference room, along with union representatives and senior management. Trevor stood at the front with his PowerPoint loaded, wearing his $300 haircut and what looked like a more expensive suit than usual. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for Midwest Steel Solutions," he began. "We're implementing a cutting-edge, AI-driven control system that will revolutionize how we operate. Predictive maintenance, real-time optimization, seamless integration across all platforms." He clicked through slides showing network diagrams and data flow charts, most of which looked suspiciously similar to systems I'd designed years ago, just with different labels and more buzzwords. "Our timeline is aggressive but achievable," Trevor continued, but his voice had that strained quality it got when he was trying to sound more confident than he felt. Full system migration by October 1st, with comprehensive testing and validation throughout the summer. Roy Kellerman raised his hand. What about safety certifications? These systems are OSHA approved. Great question, Trevor said, his smile looking more forced than usual. Skylar's team is handling all regulatory compliance. Complete documentation package, full certification transfer. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Certification transfer. Like you could just copy and paste 20 years of safety protocols from one system to another. Now, Trevor said, I want to thank Frank Morrison for his years of dedicated service. Frank's been instrumental in documenting our legacy systems and training the transition team. He paused, looking directly at me with what might have been a challenge in his eyes. Please join me in recognizing Frank's contributions as he moves into his well-deserved retirement. Polite applause. A few genuine smiles from guys who'd worked with me for years, but mostly just the awkward clapping of people who weren't sure what was happening but knew they should participate. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. Trevor was still smiling, waiting for me to say something gracious about passing the torch and trusting the future to capable hands. Instead, I said, before we move forward, I think everyone should understand the regulatory requirements for modifying safety-critical systems. Trevor's smile flickered. Frank, I appreciate your diligence, but we've got all the compliance issues covered. Actually, I said, I don't think you do. The room got very quiet. Carmen Rodriguez, sitting near the back, sat up straighter in her chair. According to Section 15D of our 2004 acquisition agreement, I continued, any modification to blast furnace safety systems requires written approval from the original system architect. That would be me. Trevor tried to laugh it off, but his hand was gripping his laser pointer so tight his knuckles were white. Frank, we're all on the same team here. I designed every safety protocol in this plant, I said. Every thermal control algorithm, every pressure release sequence, every emergency shutdown procedure. My name is on the patents. My signature is on the OSHA certifications. And according to our legal agreements, those systems can't be modified without my approval. The silence in the room was deafening. Trevor's face was cycling through confusion, irritation, and something that looked like barely controlled panic. Carmen cleared her throat. Frank's correct, she said. Section 15D is still in effect. I reviewed the documentation last week. What exactly does that mean? Asked Wade Pemberton, whose voice had gone up half an octave. Carmen looked at her notes. It means any changes to safety-critical systems require Frank's written consent. And if he were to withdraw that consent, or if he were terminated without cause, the systems would need complete recertification. How long does recertification take? Roy asked, leaning forward in his chair. For safety-critical blast furnace controls? Carmen consulted her files. 18 to 24 months. And the plant would need to shut down during the inspection process. The room erupted, not in anger, but in the kind of shocked murmuring that happens when people suddenly understand they're standing on the edge of a cliff they didn't know was there. Trevor tried to regain control, his voice higher and more strained than I'd ever heard it. Okay, folks, seems we've got a little technical hiccup here. Nothing to worry about, but this is obviously something we can work through. But people were already standing. Wade was pulling his laptop from his bag, breathing through his mouth like a man trying not to be sick. Braden was frantically typing on his tablet. Frank, Trevor said, turning to me with desperation creeping into his voice, you've been with us for 19 years. I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement here. I looked around the room at guys like Roy and Pete, men who'd spent their careers keeping the furnaces running, who'd trusted me to build systems that kept them safe. I thought about Katie's tuition and Jake's college plans and Linda's steady faith that I'd always find a way to provide for our family. But I also thought about Furnace 2 and overpressure conditions, and what happens when consultants who've never seen molten steel try to optimize systems they don't understand. Actually, I said, I think I'd like to explore my options. What followed was 3 weeks of the most intense legal and technical review I'd ever experienced. Carmen brought in outside counsel. Trevor brought in his own lawyers from some white shoe firm in New York. Skylar Brooks and his team tried frantically to reverse engineer systems they'd never understood in the first place. The facts were simple and brutal. I owned the intellectual property rights to every safety-critical system in the plant. My approval was legally required for any modifications. And without those systems, Midwest Steel Solutions couldn't operate. Trevor tried everything. He offered me bonuses, consulting contracts, even a position as senior technical advisor where I could mentor the next generation while embracing digital innovation. But every offer came with the same underlying assumption, that I would eventually sign off on replacing my systems with his Austin consultant's AI solution. The problem was, I'd actually reviewed their solution thoroughly, and it was garbage. Skylar's team had built what amounted to a sophisticated data visualization platform that could display furnace temperatures and pressure readings in real time. It could even trend the data and send alerts when values moved outside normal ranges, but it couldn't actually control anything. It had no understanding of the complex interactions between temperature, pressure, chemistry, and physics that make steel production work. It's like replacing a surgeon with a really expensive thermometer, I told Linda one night over dinner. Sure, it can tell you when something's wrong, but it can't fix it. Linda set down her fork and looked at me with those steady brown eyes that had seen me through 2 decades of shift work and midnight emergency calls. Frank, she said, what do you really want to do here? I thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? To be right, to be respected, to protect my family's financial security, or something else entirely? I want those 2,400 workers to go home safe every night, I said finally. Same as they have for the past 19 years. The final confrontation came at the quarterly board meeting in September. Trevor had scheduled a presentation for investors about the digital transformation initiative, complete with projected cost savings and efficiency improvements. He'd even prepared a slide deck highlighting the seamless transition from legacy to next-generation systems. I wasn't on the agenda. I wasn't even invited to the presentation. But Carmen had advised me that as the system architect, I had the right to address any board discussion about modifications to safety-critical systems. So I showed up. The ballroom at the Cleveland Marriott was packed with investors, board members, and senior management. The room smelled like fresh coffee and expensive cologne. Trevor stood at the front with his projector, wearing what looked like a new suit and running through slides about Industry 4.0 and digital transformation and competitive advantage. His numbers looked impressive if you didn't know anything about steel production. 30% efficiency gains, 20% cost reduction, seamless integration with existing infrastructure. Our AI-driven control system represents a quantum leap forward, Trevor was saying, but I could hear the strain in his voice now, the way it got tight when he was trying to convince himself as much as his audience. Predictive maintenance capabilities, real-time optimization, seamless integration with existing platforms. I waited until he got to the slide about implementation timeline. That's when I stood up from my seat in the back of the room. Excuse me, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the sudden silence. I have some concerns about the safety certification process. Trevor's face went white. His hand actually shook as he set down his laser pointer. He'd been hoping I wouldn't show up, that I'd quietly accept one of his buyout offers and disappear into retirement. Frank, he said, his voice cracking slightly, I don't think this is the appropriate venue. Actually, interrupted Martha Hayes, the board chairwoman, if this concerns safety certifications, I think we need to hear it. I walked to the front of the room, feeling the weight of 20 years' experience behind every step. The investors watched me with the kind of attention people give to unexpected entertainment, not yet understanding they were about to witness a corporate execution. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my name is Frank Morrison. For 19 years, I've designed and maintained every safety-critical system in this facility. I hold the patents on our thermal management algorithms. My signature is on every OSHA certification. And according to our acquisition agreement, no modifications can be made to these systems without my approval. The room was dead silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, someone's coffee cup clicking against a saucer. I've reviewed the proposed replacement system, I continued. It's a data visualization platform with some basic trending capabilities. It cannot actually control blast furnace operations. It has no understanding of the physical and chemical processes involved in steel production. And implementing it would require shutting down our facility for 18 to 24 months while we obtain new safety certifications. Martha Hayes looked at Trevor with the kind of expression that ends careers. Is this accurate? Trevor was frantically shuffling through his notes, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Well, there are some regulatory considerations, but it's not a consideration, I said flatly. It's the law. You cannot operate blast furnaces with uncertified control systems. Period. Another board member, an older gentleman named William Knox, leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, what would be required to obtain your approval for the new system? I looked around the room at faces that represented millions of dollars in investment, at Trevor's desperate expression, at Carmen Rodriguez nodding encouragingly from her seat near the legal team. The proposed system would need to actually work, I said. It would need to demonstrate the same level of safety and reliability as our current systems. And it would need to be designed by people who understand steel production, not consultants who think blast furnaces are just another data management problem. The questions came fast after that. How long would recertification take? What were the insurance implications? Could the plant operate during the transition? The answers weren't good for Trevor's timeline or his budget. By the end of the meeting, Trevor's digital transformation initiative was dead. The investors were talking about bringing in someone with actual industry experience to run the technology transition. Wade Pemberton was already updating his LinkedIn profile on his phone, but Trevor wasn't done. As people filed out of the ballroom, he cornered me near the exit. "Frank," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury, "you just cost this company millions of dollars. And for what? To protect some obsolete systems that should have been retired years ago?" I looked at this 36-year-old MBA who'd never built anything more complicated than a PowerPoint presentation, who thought 19 years of keeping people safe was legacy thinking. "Trevor," I said, "those obsolete systems kept 2,400 people employed and alive for 2 decades. Your revolutionary system couldn't safely run a coffee maker, let alone a blast furnace." His face went red. "You know what, Frank? You won. Congratulations. I hope you're happy when this place shuts down because we couldn't modernize fast enough to compete." I thought about that for a moment. You know what would make me happy, Trevor? If someone had asked me 6 months ago how to actually improve our systems instead of assuming everything I built was worthless because it didn't come with an app. That's when Martha Hayes made an interesting observation. "Mr. Morrison," she said, approaching us with William Knox and 2 other board members, "you obviously have valuable expertise. Have you considered consulting work?" 3 months later, I was sitting in a much nicer conference room in Detroit, meeting with the board of Great Lakes Green Steel, a startup focused on environmentally sustainable steel production. They were building a new facility using hydrogen-based reduction technology, eliminating the carbon emissions of traditional blast furnaces while maintaining all the safety and reliability standards I'd spent my career perfecting. "Frank," said their CEO, Rebecca Martinez, a former U.S. Steel executive who actually understood both steel production and modern technology, "we need someone who understands both traditional steel production and cutting-edge process control. Someone who can design systems that are both safe and innovative." The offer was solid. $195,000 salary plus consulting fees, full benefits, and equity in a company that was positioned to revolutionize American steel production. But there were trade-offs. I'd have to relocate to Detroit. My pension benefits from Midwest wouldn't fully transfer. And there were legal risks. Consolidated Industrial Partners wasn't happy about losing their entire technology platform and had lawyers looking for ways to challenge the IP agreements. More importantly, they wanted me to build something new, not just maintain something old. But the best part was the respect. When I explained the importance of fail-safe systems and redundant safety protocols, nobody rolled their eyes or talked about paradigm shifts. They took notes and asked intelligent questions about implementation timelines and regulatory requirements. I called Linda from the hotel that night. "How'd it go?" she asked. "They offered me the job," I said. And I think I'm going to take it. But we'd have to move. And there's some legal exposure with the old company." There was a pause. "What about Trevor and his Austin consultants?" I looked out the hotel window at the Detroit skyline, at the cranes and construction that meant people were still building things, still making things, still trusting experienced hands to get the job done right. "Trevor's not my problem anymore," I said. "Last I heard, Midwest Steel was hiring a new chief technology officer, someone with actual steel production experience. What happened to the AI system?" Turns out investors don't like the idea of shutting down production for 2 years to save money on labor costs. Linda laughed. "So you won?" I thought about that for a minute. About Katie finishing her mechanical engineering degree with a paid internship lined up at Great Lakes Green Steel. About Jake getting recruited by 3 different colleges for football. About 20 years of building systems that worked because they were built right. "I think we all won," I said. "Well, except maybe Trevor." 6 months into my new job, I got a call from Roy Kellerman. "Frank," he said, "thought you'd want to know. Trevor's gone. They brought in a new CTO, a guy named Mike Sullivan. 30 years at Bethlehem Steel. What about the Austin consultants?" "Gone too. Turns out running a steel plant isn't the same as running a software company." Who would have thought? I wasn't surprised. You can't disrupt physics. You can't optimize chemistry with machine learning algorithms. And you can't replace experience with enthusiasm, no matter how many buzzwords you use or how expensive your consulting fees are. These days, I'm designing control systems for hydrogen reduction furnaces, working with technology that didn't exist when I started my career. It's challenging, innovative work that builds on everything I learned over 20 years of keeping traditional furnaces running safely and efficiently. But the principles are the same. Understand the process, respect the physics, build systems that fail safe, and never forget that behind every control algorithm are real people doing real work in a real world where mistakes have real consequences. Trevor Ashford taught me something valuable, though he probably didn't mean to. Sometimes the best way to embrace the future is to make damn sure you understand the past. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is insist that expertise matters more than enthusiasm, that competence trumps credentials, and that building things that last is more important than building things that impress venture capitalists. My name is Frank Morrison. I'm 54 years old and I've spent my career building systems that work. That's not legacy thinking. That's just good engineering. If you enjoyed watching Frank take down Trevor and his Austin consultants, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think about corporate digital transformation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and ring that notification bell, because we've got more stories like this about experienced workers who refuse to get steamrolled by management. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.